evening, and welcome to the spring webinar series, Resources for Cannabis Businesses. My name is Natalie Darvis, and I am the chair of the business department of Oaksterdam University, the first and longest running cannabis college in the world. I'm excited to be your moderator this evening for tonight's topic, patient and consumer safety. We are here tonight because the Department of Cannabis Regulation has officially launched the Business Licensing and Compliance Assistance, or BLC, program to assist social equity applicants in the city of Los Angeles with obtaining a commercial cannabis license and operating a successful cannabis business. This series is part of broader BLC program efforts, which also include live webinars with different subjects and experts, checklists, worksheets, and other management tools you can download and use, self-directed online education on important topics related to running a successful cannabis business. And this is all run through the BLC's new learning management system, which is usually referred to as the LMS. Please visit cannabis.lacity.org for more announcements on our ever-expanding BLC program. As part of the city's social equity program, DCR has launched the BLC LMS portal, where you now have access to these recorded webinars in addition to online courses and digital resources made especially for you. Information on how to access this LMS will be in the chat. Please note that there is a much longer educational series on tonight's topic that is already live in this LMS. So please check out the series, Patient and Consumer Safety, in your LMS now. Before we get started with tonight's topic, we have a few housekeeping rules. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and can be viewed after the editing process via multiple channels. You will be muted with cameras off for the duration of the webinar. This means that your camera and audio functions will not be available to you during this session. However, you will be able to see and hear all of the panelists. There is an open chat box where you can interact with one another for networking or comment on the information. Please ask questions about this subject matter in the Q&A box. We are gathering them and will be responding to as many of your questions as possible during the QA session towards the last 20 minutes of tonight's webinar. You are encouraged to utilize the Q&A box at the bottom pane of your Zoom screen. Chat is available for interaction with other participants. And if you use the Q&A box for questions, everyone will be able to see the questions when they are answered. Please make sure you RSVP to get more information on the live Grow 2022 Career Fair, which starts this weekend. The link for this will be dropped in the chat. And a friendly reminder, please use caution when sharing personal information in a public forum, and keep your questions focused on tonight's topic, as it's going to move fast this evening. So without further ado, it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce you to tonight's subject matter expert, Tiffany Watkins. Tiffany Watkins is well known as Lady Canna. Tiffany's grassroots campaigning and advocacy go back more than 30 years. She has been heavily involved in patient representation, harm reduction, public policy, and overall community organizing. Tiffany is currently the Director of Sales and Marketing at the People's Ecosystem and is the founder and CEO of Vanguard Media, a media platform and magazine that is dedicated to women in cannabis. Vanguard showcases the efforts, innovation, and creativity of all women. In addition to these pursuits, Tiffany sits on many boards and committees where she helps craft changes in cannabis policy, public health, and social justice. Good evening, Tiffany. We're so excited. Yes, where we go, we are off mute. Good evening. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you.
Great. Well, we're so excited to hear your presentation. Go ahead and start your screen share and take it away.
All right, will do. Let it load up here.
Great. All right, I can't wait to hear this.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Patient and Consumer Safety. This webinar is in regards to licensed retail businesses and how they play a key role in protecting and businesses and how they play a key role in protecting health and safety of cannabis consumers. Retail sales professionals in a dispensary or a delivery operation are in a position to offer important advice on product selection, dosing to their customers, and help guide them towards a safe and positive experience with cannabis. Tonight, we're going to briefly walk through the roles of the responsibilities of a bud tender and look at some of the key aspects of customer and patient relations. Then we'll take a look at some of the main safety considerations that people are working on in this type of retail sales role that they need to keep in mind when they're helping their customers. And please note again that there's a significantly expanded version of this series already live in your DCR LMS. We will also be having office hours that will be held on Fridays starting March 25th through to the end of April. The office hours are from noon to 1 p.m. and they're with me. And I look forward to meeting you all virtually and having more in-depth conversations on this topic. Let's get started. So here are some key terms and concepts that we're going to go over throughout tonight's webinar. Bud tender, consultant, sales associate, or retail sales associate is some of the common terms you'll hear for a bud tender. In store, you'll have medical patients or adult use consumers. And then we'll also be talking a little bit about cannabis consumer safety. So let's go over some of the responsibilities of the bud tender role. Safe retail sales. So it sounds like a no-brainer, but there are specific skills that are required to be a bud tender. You must provide a safe service, a discreet service, a well-rounded service and a well-rounded educational service for the consumer or patient that comes in. They're counting on you. So some of these skills and qualifications are customer service. That is the innate ability to build trust, a genuine trust between the bud tender and the patient or consumer that's coming in. Now, product knowledge is key. They must know some of the basic things about cannabinoids, dosing, and effects, side effects, and interactions. But you can always teach product knowledge, but you can't always teach customer service. That's kind of, like I said, an innate ability. And then the utmost of discretion is advised for anybody who's coming in and talking about a medical condition that they may want to alleviate with cannabis. We have to keep that under wraps. We definitely have to have bud tenders being safe with people's information. So let's dive a little bit deeper into customer service. Now, your bud tenders must ask the right questions. They have to actively listen to their clientele and ask probing questions that will allow the patient to really tell them what they would like to have. Is this a patient, a medical patient? Have they come in with the idea that maybe they can find some relief from a medical ailment? Is this a person who just wants to come in and maybe they just want to have an elevated experience? Or maybe they're new to cannabis. A bud tender has to listen and really ask questions without going too deep that will allow the patient or consumer to tell them what they want. Now, they need to also keep consumer safety in mind, like I said before. And this ranges anything from not talking very loudly about a medical condition, not sharing this patient's information with the bud tender next to them or somewhere in the back. Also, their safety is in how the product is handled and how the product is introduced, making sure that if they've mentioned something like hypertension or a breathing issue such as asthma, that you're guiding them to products that will not exacerbate their symptoms. And like I was saying before, it's much harder to teach this customer service than it is the product knowledge. With that said, the product knowledge is important because when a client comes in, they want the bud tender to be their source of information, their expert. So they're going to need a basic knowledge of cannabinoids and their effects, something more than just, oh, this has got high THC. They need to understand when a person maybe needs CBD or CBN. They just need to have a good working knowledge of the plant. Understanding the different methods of ingestion is key for keeping patients safe. Again, if someone's in a situation where they shouldn't be inhaling smoke or vape, then perhaps they might need an edible, or maybe they have an ailment that could be alleviated by a topical. We just need to make sure that bud tenders are understanding that there are different methods of ingestion, and they're able to pair them with what they're hearing when they're fielding questions from their consumers. And of course, recognizing the challenges of cultivar selection, cultivar or strain selection. As we know, the names can be confusing, and pairing the names with the effect can also be confusing. And if it's confusing to us, those of us who navigate the cannabis industry, what do we think it's like for our consumers when they come in? So we need to be knowledgeable enough to guide them to the proper cultivar that will give them the experience that they're looking for. And then, of course, discretion. HIPAA considerations. So we know that the HIPAA laws really don't apply to cannabis. We're not enforced by those, but we act in cannabis as if we are. So we definitely want our bud tenders making sure that they're following the Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act. That means that when someone is talking about a medical condition, that we're going to maybe bring them over to the corner of the room or to the end of the counter to make sure that what they're talking about stays between bud tender and patient. We're also not going to encourage them not to share that information with other bud tenders, or again, in the back when they're making selections for their patient. And even our non-medical customers deserve the same amount of discretion. So these are some typical bud tender responsibilities in store day to day. They're going to check patients in and customers as well. And that means checking IDs, making sure that, that medical recommendations or medical cards are valid and in place. They're providing a discreet consultation. Again, remember I said maybe perhaps pulling someone to the side, making that judgment on, is this a conversation that needs to be had in the middle of a very busy time during, maybe a rush hour during operations. Control product and currency. This is a real important one. Control of product and currency keeps the store safe. It's the other side of safety is the internal safety of your store. So product, if it's in a case, pulling it out of case and never walking away from it. Never putting it in the hands of a patient or client and walking away until the sale's been made. And never turning your back on any currency. If needing to make change or got a large bill we need to deposit, making sure the register is closed, making sure the point of sale is logged out of at the end of the day. All these things make your internal operations more safe. And management of safety risk in an all cash business. Well, we know in cannabis, we're all cash businesses. So sometimes that's a buddy system for night deposits. That could be anything that keeps your store safe. Your bud tenders can be responsible for any or all of these actions. So let's talk about customer relations. So when a client comes into the store, a bud tender needs to assess the need of that client. Are they a medical patient? Are they an adult use consumer? What is the goal of the consumer? Are they looking to have an elevated experience? Maybe they haven't used cannabis for many, many decades, and they're interested in seeing, now that we're in this new marketplace, what it's all about. So assessing that need is really important. Now, after that, needing to understand the limitations of the consumer. What's their age group? Are they a sensitive population? Bud tenders need to be able to ask the proper probing questions in order to get to the limitations of the clientele. That may not be visibly something they can assess. They might have to dive in a little bit deeper for that. Are there health concerns that may pose an issue? Again, referencing back to a breathing issue. Do they have bronchitis? Something that they're mentioning that is concerning, that if they tried a product in a certain way, they may have an adverse effect. So, psychoactive versus intoxicating. Now, this is something that when bud tenders are asking questions and listening to the answers, is very common for a consumer not to quite understand the difference here, and that's okay. But a bud tender should be able to explain, if a substance is psychoactive, that it changes the functions of the nervous system. Coffee, tea, melatonin, common things that people have. They're psychoactive, but they're not necessarily intoxicating. So a bud tender needs to understand that when a person says, oh, I just don't really want to, I've heard psychoactive and I don't really want to have that experience, and to explain to them that intoxicating effects are things that you would get from something like alcohol or THC. And so that makes a well-rounded experience of education and product pairing. Now let's go over some of the health impacts of smoking. Inhalation. It is by far the most familiar and really effective in terms of time it takes for the onset. It is the most popular method of ingestion. Flour and pre-rolls, smokable concentrates, not ideal, again, for folks with health concerns like respiratory issues. Sometimes it could be other metabolic issues. In these cases, when you're faced as a bud tender with someone with these types of ailments, it's best to refer them to their doctors to get the utmost of care for these situations. But then also your responsibility, or the responsibility of the bud tenders, is to make sure that they're gearing them towards other products that they're not breathing in. So here's some alternatives that a bud tender could offer. Vaping, edibles, sublingual. So that's, just to be clear, something that's placed in the mouth, under tongue, or in between the gum and the cheek. Topicals, transdermal, or suppository. Now, transdermal patches, oftentimes people confuse topical with transdermal. A topical application, a cream, a salve, that's going to be on top of the skin. It is going to go in through the pores, but likely not going to give you as deep as an effect as a transdermal, say, patch. Some transdermal applications can give a bit of an elevation. So it's good for bud tenders to understand what's in everything that they're offering as alternatives. And again, listening to their patient to see what type of effect they'd like to have, so that they can tell them what they may encounter when they're utilizing certain products. Now, suppositories are inserted into the body and can also give an elevated effect depending on what cannabinoids are present in that product. So bud tenders have to also remember, every customer is different. There's no one that's going to come in there that's going to have the same effect off of, take one product, give it to 50 people, you're going to get just about 50 different effects. So make sure that your customer is comfortable asking questions about what experience they're going to have. And bud tenders are in a place to put their minds at ease, really, and let them know that your experience is your own. And also when doing a recommendation on products, making sure that they understand that starting off in small doses is best, especially if you're new to experiencing cannabinoids. So let's go over some safety considerations. Safe consumption. Bud tenders should always encourage safe and healthy consumption. There are some unwanted effects that cannabis can produce. We don't talk about them always. Much of what we hear is always positive. So the unwanted effects can be quite fearsome to some of the consumers. So bud tenders need to be able to understand and explain what these are so that consumers, patients are not caught off guard. Again, dosing even can be different from person to person. We all think of other things before. Let's think about other things like alcohol or any pharmaceutical drugs. The dosages can be different from person to person based on what you've eaten in a day or what your body composition is. Are you larger? Do you have a faster metabolism or slower? So these things can really affect how much you dose. It's the same for cannabis. So keeping that in mind, have people understand that their experience is their own and that when they're new to cannabis, bud tenders should be encouraging them to log their experience, log how much they've had, and then log the effect. Different types of products have different dosing considerations, and there's a multitude of products out there and a lot of people wanting to try them. So the best advice is to start low and go slow, microdosing. So let's quickly cover a few of the side effects. So it's mostly going to be non-significant side effects: the dry mouth, the dizziness, a little bit of drowsiness, I feel a little sleepy, or euphoria, getting that elevated, euphoric experience. Now, these are some more significant side effects. These are the side effects that can affect how a patient or consumer looks at the product selections, or if they even choose to try cannabis again. Tachycardia, now that is an elevated heart rate. Panic attacks, those two can go hand in hand. Cannabis, THC, especially at higher dosages, can cause an elevated heart rhythm. So this could be unsafe for those who have existing heart conditions. So when you're listening, should be taking note of those types of things. Dysphoria, even things like memory loss, paranoia, these things that we have heard in media and in communities are kind of tongue in cheek, but these can be very significant, especially for a new consumer, someone who's never tried or someone who hasn't had any cannabis for many years. Maybe they had some back in college and they're wanting to try again in the new marketplace. They would like to try cannabis today, and they could have some of these significant side effects. A bud tender should really know to talk about these effects and tell them what to look out for. Here's some more of those significant side effects that could be present: changes in blood pressure, alterations or magnifications of perceptions. Again, that is with the distortions of time, paranoia, hallucinations, these feelings of psychosis. These higher dosages of very strong products could bring these on. Some as serious as hyperemesis. Cannabis hyperemesis syndrome is a real thing. People talk about CHS often. Sometimes people don't take it seriously, but it induces a great amount of vomiting, which could lead to dehydration and other poor effects of the body. So patients and consumers need to be aware that it's okay to talk to their bud tender, their doctor, their pharmacist about some of the effects that they're getting from cannabis, especially if they think they're getting significantly adverse side effects. There are some populations out there that are at higher risk of having these adverse reactions. Those who are 65 and older, those who have existing medical conditions or are taking pharmaceutical medications. And again, sometimes it's just because they're new to it and they're taking way too high of a dosage, or the last time when they come into the store and they tell their bud tender, I had a really bad experience with that product, fill in the blank. It's because they likely had too much of that product. So a bud tender really needs to know how to listen to the experiences of the client that comes in and pair those experiences with their knowledge, their expertise in determining, was this a medical condition that maybe they should go back to their doctor with, or do we need to start low and go slow? So here are some things that people are in that would be considered high risk. Those who need to operate a motor vehicle within the next few hours. Perhaps they need to either wait until they're finished driving, or maybe perhaps have a very low dosage so that their motor control is not affected by cannabinoids. Cardiovascular disease. Again, heart conditions. We spoke of the tachycardia, the elevated heart rhythms. Those with cardiovascular disease are at risk of experiencing adverse reactions of these symptoms. Pregnant or nursing, it's best. There's a lot of opinions out there. And a bud tender's opinion on this can be quite influencing. So always be sure that your bud tenders know that the patient must make the best choice for them. And if they're having trouble making sure if that's a healthy, safe choice for their body, that they can also talk with their physician or OBGYN. Psychiatric conditions and seniors. Psychiatric conditions are a tricky one because we mentioned before, one of the more serious side effects could be having a distorted view, paranoia, and things that might make it seem like everything's not okay. So if a person is expressing that, your bud tenders should know to, again, refer to their own medical doctors and to have them try dosages that are paired with being very small and able to limit the intake that's best for the patient themselves. Seniors, of course, could be a lot of medications and could be a lot of pre-existing conditions. Of course, they should talk as well with their doctors, but I believe that bud tenders, when they have enough knowledge, can listen to what ailments they're trying to alleviate and pair them with good products. With that, we wonder, do you have any questions this evening? And if so, we're going to go into Q&A, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. That was really interesting presentation. There's so much to unpack on this topic of patient and consumer safety. So yeah, I have a ton of questions for you. I thought it'd be best to, start off with, acknowledging that a lot of people who are interested in this information on patient and consumer safety are probably those new to bud tending or looking to start a career in bud tending. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think are great skills to bring to the table when starting a career in bud tending?
Sure. I think the best skills that you can bring with you are the skills that you use in other jobs of customer service, of being able to build that genuine, trustworthy experience in just a few moments with a client that comes in. It really goes a long way. Because I think oftentimes when people take a look at a bud tending role, this is new, it's exciting, you're in a dispensary, you're surrounded by products that you either haven't seen or that you're really interested in, and you can lose sight of the fact that this is customer service just like any other job. It's retail sales. So when you're selling something, people like to buy from a friend. They like to buy why you're there, why you're invested in it. So them understanding your experience helps them share their experiences.
It's really great advice. I hear a lot of things about the entourage, or now I think it's starting to be shifted to be called the ensemble effect. What does this mean, and how do you think this is important to a bud tender's role in patient and consumer safety?
That's a great question, and I love this one because everyone's talking about it so much. Consumers are becoming more educated. That's for one. In the last 5 years, we've seen an uptick in what the average consumer understands about cannabinoids when they walk into a dispensary. And, but there's still some misinformation out there. People still think that the best products are the ones that have the highest THC. And when we want to talk about the entourage or an ensemble effect, we want to understand that every cannabinoid, THC and all of its constituent cannabinoids, work together to bring the best experience of mind and body. And we don't have a lot of research, but the research that we do have collectively around the world has really shown that when THC at moderate dosages and amounts, along with other cannabinoids, get a much better effect and a lot more efficacy. So, I think that it's good for bud tenders to know how to explain that, because some people go, nah, I want the highest THC.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum, I think, for the industry, that patients and consumers are currently driven by THC percentage in terms of how they buy. Yeah. And those who have been in the industry a long time, and the people working in the science side of it, know that that's actually really not the best method or way to select a cannabis product. And you identified a lot of different ways to select a cannabis product tonight. Also, in addition to the cannabinoid profile, we have terpenes. Why don't you talk a little bit about terpenes and how they also play a bit of a role in this sort of entourage, or again, now being shifted to being called ensemble effect?
Absolutely. Terpenes, everyone wants to talk terps, and nobody's talked about it so much until the legal cannabis market. But and I mean that, not the legacy people. I think we've always really known about terpene profiles and phenotypes, right? But, it's a buzz term out there. And truthfully, there are terpenes in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Procter and Gamble and other large companies have been using terpenes to dazzle our senses in their cleaning products, in our toothpaste, and forever flavonoids in our candies and gums and things like that, and fruit juices. And so I think that people need to understand that they do have a dazzling effect on the senses. But more in depth of that, certain terpenes have an effect on the body and the elevation process. So let's take something as simple as, people say, oh, wow, I smoked too much. I feel really elevated and I'm in a danger zone. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of times that people can have the terpene limonene in order to bring themselves down. Its effect is calming. Mm-hmm. Myrcene, another effect that is really calming. I can't sleep at night. Some people back in the day would say, well, eat a few slices of mango and close your eyes for a little while. Why? Because myrcene is very prevalent in mangoes.
Yeah. It's so interesting, right? Yeah. Just like, I think that when people start learning that terpenes are botanical compounds found endemically in nature, and, cannabis plants tend to have a lot of terpenes because it's also a protective shield against pest and pathogen pressures. And it's also a way to sort of entice people in too. We've had a long relationship with cannabis, human beings. And I think that terpenes is a big part of that. All right. That was really fun little chat. Let's move on to the next question. What are the key differences that you see between a patient and a consumer, right? Tonight, we're talking about patient and consumer safety, but I think that there are some key differences.
Yeah, there really are. Consumers, let's go with consumers. Customers, they coming into the store. We all know that no matter if you're utilizing cannabis, those of us who really believe in its medical efficacy, we know that you're getting the medical benefits. But consumers come into the store, they want to buy something that elevates them or suits their needs or fits their persona at the moment. They're a customer just like going into any other store. They oftentimes know exactly what they want. They know what they've heard and how they've been influenced. And they're just looking for you to guide them straight to the products. And they're not going to talk to you a lot about what's going on with them. Mm-hmm. They want to listen to you tell them what's the best product to give them the time and experience that they want. Now, a patient, when they come in, the experience is going to be a little bit more low key. And that is because they're actually coming in there with the idea that they want to heal themselves or someone close to them. they've heard things about a certain ailment and a certain cannabinoid that go together, and they would like to see what you think about that fix. What do you think about pairing it with this ailment? And that's where we as bud tenders need to be very, very careful, the fine line between giving medical advice to giving a good ear and pairing a product with an experience that you're seeing before you and you're hearing before you. So yeah, there's some pretty big distinctions between patients and consumers.
Absolutely. And I think that's also a tricky place of if someone's coming in to purchase products for someone else. If I came into the store and you were my bud tender and I said I was purchasing a product for a teenager, what would you say?
And that would be, do you have a medical recommendation, and are you that patient's caregiver? Can you show me that you are that patient's caregiver?
Yeah. And of course we understand though that the elderly community may not be able to physically show up in person to purchase their products, so there are ways where this makes sense, but I just wanted to note that, there's all these sort of tricky places that you are the gateway for the cannabis industry as a bud tender. So since a lot of people view bud tenders as a gateway to the cannabis industry, especially for new consumers, what are some problems that could arise with this situation for consumers?
Well, number one is misinformation. That is such a huge one. So when hiring bud tenders, it's an important role. Yes, it is a retail sales role, but it is important that they're providing safe information. I always take it back to, pharmaceutical dispensaries, the pharmacies. Pharmaceutical techs do work with with the medications, but cashiers are oftentimes just like bud tenders. They have information, but they always defer to the pharmacist. And I think that in a dispensary, a cannabis dispensary, the bud tender has the responsibility to make sure that they're providing information that is accurate, because that lends to safety. And if they don't know, they need to say that they don't know and ask for permission from that patient to get information from someone who does, or to tell them, you need to go talk to your doctor or pharmacist to get further information and recommendations, and then let's have this conversation.
I think that's really great advice. All right, let's pivot a little bit. What are the benefits of microdosing? You mentioned microdosing in tonight's awesome presentation. And so what are the benefits of microdosing? Let's start there, and then I have a follow-up question.
Sure. The number one benefit of microdosing is giving yourself a chance to see what you're feeling. Whether it's, even with a pre-roll, you can take one puff and see how that feels. That is microdosing. Or you can have a tincture and take maybe, just 0.2, milligrams, just a little drop to see how that feels. Give yourself about 30 minutes to an hour, see how it feels. Maybe you need a little more, or if you're starting to experience effects, you're done for the night. That's it, and I think that is the number one reason why I'm a great proponent of microdosing, is to give people, there's a lot of high potency products out there.
Yeah.
And people just go all in, and suddenly they're having an experience, and you can't take less, folks.
Yeah.
So, you can't take it out of you. So I think microdosing is key in making sure that you curate the experience that you want.
Yeah. And there's a lot more information on, onset of all these different products in the expanded series and the learning management system. But I think it's really important to note that you do need to wait 30 minutes or even far more than 30 minutes in terms of an edible.
Mm-hmm.
I like to share this information a lot because I think it's really interesting that, now we have all of these states that have passed some form of medical cannabis legislation and even expanding into adult use. And one of the only negative effects that we've been able to collect in terms of stats is that there actually has been an uptick in people calling, police offices because they think that they're hallucinating from taking too many edibles, right? And so I think that this is a major consideration of bud tender. And this is like, what do you think would happen if you turn on a customer to an edible and you don't really explain how to meter out taking that edible and what could happen? This is something I think that we should talk about for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. That can be a very dangerous zone. Everybody talks about the experience with a little, cracked a little smile on their face. It took way too much, but that could be a very serious situation for a person who's just starting. Not, they buy a cookie and, they think it's a cookie. I eat cookies, not understanding that this cookie is potent if eaten all at once, or if you ate 4 cookies out of the bag. And so I think that it is a responsibility of bud tenders to be able to describe the difference. Hey, look on the bag itself. This is a low dose. This is a medium dose, and this is a high dose. Recommendation: you start with a low dose and give yourself an hour or so, because you're right. 30 minutes is great. Some people can really feel it, but if you have a slower metabolism, it could take you 2 hours to get the effect off that small amount. And if you keep eating, once it kicks in, it's going to kick in all at once. It's not going to kick in slow. So I think that, bud tenders really need to be keen on letting customers know, customers and patients alike, because anyone can have a poor experience. The customers that don't come in with any medical need oftentimes don't want to hear it. They're like, I'm having a party. I want this. And you go, well, this is what I need to tell you because I'm behind the counter. So I'm going to let you know, go slow, start low, and have a great night. But it's definitely good to have that phrase in your repertoire when dealing with anyone when you're standing behind the counter.
That's great. Great advice. So do you think that smoking cannabis will continue to decline in popularity? You noted that tonight in your presentation. And if so, where do you see products going, especially products that are there to serve the medical population that is currently ingesting cannabis?
Right. Yeah, smoking cannabis is on the decline. Will it ever go away? It is my opinion that it won't ever go away. It is tried and true. There are some of us who swear by it and would never ingest any other way. But like I said, when I say consumers are becoming smarter, what I mean is they're really becoming filled with information. And so they have a lot of choices. And those who deem themselves perhaps more health conscious might not want to pick up something that requires smoking or vaping. And so what I see and what I'm noticing are people really getting in to the gummies and liquid juices, shots, things like that. And, kind of curating their experience like that, taking a little bit or taking as much as they wish. And then of course, self-care is up here right now. Everyone's talking about self-care. So products, cosmeceuticals, those that, bath bombs and gels and things like that are becoming a very popular way for folks to achieve the experience that they want.
Love that. So do you think it's okay for bud tenders to make recommendations about other herbs or other products to take in conjunction with cannabis? So if a patient talks about inflammation, do you think a bud tender should mention things like turmeric, which is well known as an anti-inflammatory plant, along with THCA? And this is going into some details, but it's kind of when you talk about this generally.
No, I understand exactly where that's going because I am a person who understands that fully. That is my first thought. What can I put with my what herbs can I put together? What can to get an effect that I need? And unfortunately, that is not something that I believe that we can really go over in the retail space. We have to remember that this is a retail establishment. It is not a clinician's office. So, bud tenders need to be very careful when trying to pair products together. It's best that you pair items together that are in your store and in your counter. Number one, it's great for sales in your store. It's great for the operations of your store, up sales, things like that. And two, you never know what type of experience. Maybe they're allergic to turmeric. Maybe they can't have ginkgo biloba. Maybe they can't have these things. And because this is not a clinician's office, you can't go over these contraindications with them as a bud tender. So I would say that is rather a no-no, although you would really feel like you want to in your heart, we're compassionate, but it's like, it's best to shy away from that.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And it's great advice. You mentioned briefly pregnancy, and I think this is a really interesting topic. So let's talk about pregnancy and cannabis use again, because we know, and again, this is expanded upon in this series on the LMS, there's not really solid evidence in either direction, which can be really frustrating for pregnant women. But we don't have solid evidence saying that that it's totally okay to consume cannabis when pregnant, and we don't have solid evidence saying that, you know, it isn't, right? It's either you can or you can't, and there's been lots of research that says both are fine. And so we're really kind of in a conundrum in the cannabis industry around this. So how, as a bud tender, do you think it's best to explain that, or what kind of advice would you give a pregnant woman who has a lot of questions in a dispensary around pregnancy and cannabis use?
Sure. I think that bud tenders need to be listening to the questions they're getting. Are the questions that are coming to you from this pregnant individual questions about product selection, this one or that one? I want this, but I'm not so sure. Can you tell me about this product and tell me about that product? Or are they really truly asking, is this okay? Am I safe? I'm 5 months pregnant. Is it okay for me to take this?
Mhm.
And so those are two different types of situations. One needs to go back to their doctor
Mhm.
and or their doula or a trusted guide and get information to make them comfortable in their experience of utilizing cannabinoids during their pregnancy. Because we're talking about an opinion piece. Like you said, we don't have evidence either way. So it's up to someone to make an opinion. What if you're a bud tender and you don't believe that a pregnant woman should be utilizing cannabinoids? Your opinion could be devastating to her. So you need to keep it to yourself and make sure that you're listening for what type of treatment she's asking for. Advice on products or advice on usage and safety for herself.
That's a really great distinction. And I think a really easy way for people to just stop and think about what they're doing before they start having this conversation with a pregnant customer. All right. You brought up cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, and I thought that was really interesting. And I wanted to note that I think, you know, one of the things that is of great benefit of having this nationwide rollout of more medical cannabis systems, more adult use systems, is that it actually took more people being willing to tell people in the emergency room that they had consumed cannabis to even understand and come up with this new syndrome, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. So what other types of stories or what other types of medical revelations do you think are possible as our society keeps on moving towards decriminalization of cannabis?
I think that people are going to start to feel like they can be more open without consequences. Like you're saying, they're feeling, they're have some cannabis and all of a sudden they're vomiting out of control. It's been 2 days, they're still vomiting. They feel like I can go to the emergency room and ask for help. I think this is going to trickle into going into psychiatric treatments as well, and therapy sessions. People are going to feel more comfortable saying, I'm getting alleviation or I'm getting exacerbation from doing this, and that this may be cannabis. But they're feeling like they can share that part of their life. And I think that it's going to really shift how, and this is my opinion, I just really feel like it's going to shift how we think about medical treatment and have us asking the questions, is that drug really for me? Or do I take it into my own hands and do some research and see what cannabinoids, pairing of cannabinoids and other things can do for me?
That's a great answer. You also mentioned a log about consumption. I really like that. Will you tell me a little more about, like, what is a consumption log? How might a bud tender recommend that to a customer?
Consumption
Log, like jotting down, like logging,
Oh,
noting. You
logging,
noted
yes.
that during your presentation this evening.
Yes, because and it's I am a huge proponent of journaling experience and writing it down and putting it away and going back to it. And I think that when you're trying something new, to keep a log of how you felt, what you had, how you felt, what you think about. You got hungry, you got the munchies, what'd you eat? and to know what your experience was like so that you can have the joy of just having and feeling and really being present in that experience. And then you can go back and analyze your feelings. As a medical patient, sometimes you need to know what worked best. Sometimes you're in too much pain, you're in too much worry to remember, did I have 2 or did I have 1 of those? Did I have 0.2 milligrams or did I have, half the box? What did I do? And so when you have this log to go back on, you can educate yourself on what your experience was. Second to that, if you're working with another provider, someone's guiding you medically, your doctor or otherwise, you can take this log to them and go, this is what I've been doing. And you can have open dialogue that way and provide them with your experiences that you've had over several weeks, ups, downs, whatever. So it's kind of twofold.
Love that. That's a really great idea. Someone should consider, creating maybe a template for that, or creating a book that people can fill out. It's a great new business venture idea. And we're always looking for that, right, in this community. All right. So my last question for you this evening is, we know that we are here to discuss the Los Angeles market, and there's a lot of dispensaries and a lot of bud tenders. There's a lot of opportunity for people to enter into the bud tending profession in LA. What advice, generally, do you have for this community of people, especially as it relates to patient and consumer safety?
Yeah, absolutely. You educate yourself, make sure you know what you are talking about, and treat your job as a bud tender as serious as you would a job that was outside of a dispensary. There's more to being a part of dispensary operations than being a participant in utilizing the cannabinoids you're trying to sell. Patients and consumers alike, they still want a professional experience. They want to feel like you're the person in charge, you're the person in the know. And take that as your responsibility to give them that experience.
That's really great advice. Well, Tiffany, as always, it's so wonderful to chat with you about cannabis and all types of subjects. You're so knowledgeable. I really thank you for your time this evening. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. I always enjoy my time here.
Have a good night. So thank you so much for attending this webinar this evening. The full course for this topic is already available in the LMS, as I've mentioned many times tonight, so you can get a lot more detailed information on tonight's subject on patient and consumer safety. This is a dense topic. There's so much to explore and understand, and this impacts every single person who works in the cannabis industry. We need to understand the people that we're serving, the products that we're recommending, and what goes into those products. In addition to this, there's also many templates available for you to use to support your business planning efforts in the learning management system for the BLC program. As well, during the month of March and beyond, these webinars are going to be happening Tuesday and Thursday evenings. This upcoming Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m., the topic will be the business of cannabis distribution with Angie Penuela Ruiz, who is the Director of Industry Relations for Distru Software Company. This informative webinar will focus on the nuts and bolts of a distribution business, as well as look at the scope of the opportunity to start a new distribution business in the city of LA. Next week, we would also love to have you come join the DCR for another webinar on March 24th, also from 6 to 7 p.m. on contracting with Knox and Ross Law Group. I would also like to share some other key info. Before you leave, please fill out a brief survey to share your experience tonight. We will be dropping the link for the survey in the chat now. We really appreciate your feedback, and we will use your feedback to fine-tune these webinars moving forward. The DCR also encourages licensed cannabis businesses to hire local, transitional, and equity workers. To support these efforts, the DCR will be hosting an in-person career fair this weekend on March 19th, 2022 at the Los Angeles Trade Technical College. If your business is hiring and you wish to meet and interview job seekers, the DCR will also provide small group and individual coaching sessions to employers wishing to learn more about successful hiring and retention practices and how to fulfill the good faith hiring requirements I mentioned of local, transitional, and equity workers. Make sure you save the date, March 19th, and RSVP to get more information on the Live Grow 2022 Career Fair. And if you are a social equity licensee, you can also sign up to receive small group and individual coaching on workforce development. We're going to drop links for forms in the chat right now, and we will contact you with more information about all these great resources I just discussed. So on behalf of the Department of Cannabis Regulation, I'd like to thank you for attending this evening. I hope you have a wonderful night, and I'll see you soon.